I want to talk for a little bit about the death of Denethor versus the death of Theoden in the books versus the movies. Now, the movies are really, really interesting. The movies have Theoden dying in like a flurry of the Witch King comes, his fell beast comes and grabs him and throws him, and then Theoden kind of dies because he's broken. Denethor dies because Gandalf kicks him with a horse, and then he falls onto the pyre, and then he runs from the pyre in a flaming ball, and then jumps from the top of the White Tower, which is a little wild. It's a little extreme. But in the book, there's something going on that's, I think, a little bit more interesting, and then I want to talk about it a little bit today, because I think the death of Denethor is set up in direct response to the death of Theoden. And I think both of them are supposed to contrast each other to show which one is better and the kind of courage that you should have in a leader. And I think Tolkien has been setting us up for this for a long time in the books, because Denethor has a conversation with Pippin very early on in the Return of the King. And in this book, he's talking about how good leaders always lead from behind and they drive their forces out. And so he's talking about the Witch King specifically in this instance and saying, oh, the Witch King will never come into the city. The Witch King always will drive his minions from behind. Same thing as Sauron. Sauron will never come to the city because he is always driving his forces from behind and he's never going to show up. Now, it's interesting to note two different things. The first, in the Battle of Helm's Deep, Theoden stays behind closed walls pretty much the entire battle. He leads his troops from behind. To be honest, he doesn't even really lead his troops all that much. He comes out of this stupor that he was put on by Wormtongue, and then he rides to Helm's Deep, kind of misses Wormtongue having a companion in Wormtongue and a counselor, wishes he had Gandalf to talk to someone. He's kind of vacillating between two different things. He's still like thawing out of his coma, for lack of better words. And then he goes up into the tower and watches the Battle of Helm's Deep, not really commanding all that much. Really, it's Éomer and Aragorn's battle to win, and Erkenbrand, who comes later with Gandalf. So Theoden doesn't do much, and he kind of leads from behind. But there's a definitive moment in Theoden's journey to Minas Tirith where he's essentially sick of leading from behind, and he leads out from the front. And there's a huge contrast here, because that chapter where Denethor says, good people always lead from behind, at the end of that chapter, one of the most shocking moments happens in the books, and I love this moment so much. It was one of the coolest moments in the books ever, where the Witch King, after they knock down the walls of Minas Tirith, or after they knock down the gate of Minas Tirith, that big wolf battering ram Gron does this. All of a sudden, rather than the trolls that come through the city, the Witch King is the first person to enter into the city. And there's two things that I think Tolkien is trying to do by showing us the Witch King is walking in first. The first is that he's essentially proclaiming victory, because before, Denethor was like, the Witch King will only come to proclaim victory. So the Witch King's riding to the city essentially saying, I've won this battle. The second thing is he's showing that the Witch King is not leading his troops from behind. Wildly, in a crazy turn of events, the Witch King is doing exactly the opposite of what Denethor thinks, and he's leading his troops from the front. He's the first person in this city. And so there's this big setup happening about what makes a good leader. Does a leader lead from the front, or does a leader lead from the back? Then the very next chapter is the Riders of the Rohirrim, the Ride of the Rohirrim chapter. And it has one of the most emotional and beautiful moments in any book that I've ever read in my entire life. It is the Charge of the Rohirrim. And this is the moment when Theoden, he gives this rousing speech, this beautiful speech to continue to ride for Rohan and ride to go save Gondor. And they're all on this mountain, or they're all on these fields. And then all of a sudden, the text talks about how Theoden charges forward on his horse Snowmane, and no one else can catch up. And it's cool too, because before that, he was so scared and fearful of the army that he saw in front of him that it said he kind of quailed and he kind of like hunched over and he didn't look like he was confident in this battle. And then all of a sudden something snaps him out of it, and he straightens up and immediately goes forward and charges. It is one of the greatest moments in all of the books, one of the most emotional moments. And Theoden, he has a tragic death. Theoden dies essentially because a bolt hits Snowmane, and Snowmane rears up and he falls on top of Theoden, which is a tragic way to die. But Theoden dies riding into battle. He was the first person that rode into battle in this occurrence. He was outpacing everyone else. And Theoden is like a 72, 73-year-old guy, and he's doing this. This is a leader who realizes that in Helm's Deep, yes, they won, but he wasn't a leader in Helm's Deep. And now, in the most beautiful moment in the book that I've read so far, he is the one who is charging forward and leading his troops. And he dies in glory, and he dies in reverence and honor, and he dies surrounded by the rest of his men who revere his dead body and think that he is high and esteemed. Éomer actually rides out to him and falls and weeps openly before all of his men before Theoden as Theoden dies. It's a tragic, tragic scene in the books. Now, Denethor, on the other hand, is all over the place. When Denethor dies, he dies in secret and in private. He has this whole discussion with Pippin saying good leaders always lead from behind. And when he's actually in the pyre, he's fighting off these forces, trying to get a knife to stab Faramir so that he can kill him and then burn both of them. Gandalf actually offers him up a solution. Because Denethor is kind of wavering to some extent, not really fully wavering. He's still out of his mind here. But at one point, Gandalf is like, you know in your heart what is right to do. Go out to battle and die in battle with your men, because you're leading from behind and you're not using that as a good general strategy. You're using that as a coward strategy to hide. And he's even worse. He's not just hiding. He's totally given up hope, because he's looked into the plans here and he's seen what Sauron's plans are, and he's terrified of these plans. And so he thinks all hope is lost. And so why he's burning himself and Faramir alive is because he has no hope anymore at all that anything's going to happen. And so when Gandalf, Pippin, and another character in the book, Beregond, they come and save Faramir, it's a really great occurrence. But this is actually the moment that Denethor dies. And it's a pretty tragic moment, because he doesn't die being burned alive. This is what the book says. Then Gandalf and Beregond, taking up the bier, bore it away toward the House of Healing, while behind them walked Pippin with downcast head. But the servants of the Lord stood gazing and stricken, as stricken men at the house of the dead. And even as Gandalf came to the end of Rath Dinen, there was a great noise. Looking back, they saw the dome of the house crack, and smokes issued forth. And then with a rush and rumble of stone, it fell in a flurry of fire. But still unabated, the flames danced and flickered among the ruins. Then, in terror, the servants fled and followed Gandalf. I think that's a tragic ending for this man. I mean, I do not like Denethor at all. He's one of my least favorite characters in the book. I think he's a really interesting character, and he's not all mad like they really portray him in the movies. His madness is a bit more gradual of a descent, but he is so frustrating and annoying to me. And this is a moment where the whole city is besieged, and their king isn't even in sight. Their king is actually planning his own death to kill himself by burning himself alive and burning his son alive. And it is just a testament to what J.R.R. Tolkien, I think, is trying to get across for what really makes a good leader, and how Theoden is such a better leader and such a wiser king. Even though Denethor is a really wise man, I actually don't think he's wise. I think he's shrewd, and I think he's cunning, and he has knowledge, but he doesn't really have wisdom. Although that's debatable, I think. But I think this is why Tolkien in this book is setting up this idea that Theoden is just mounds better of a king than Denethor is. Because Denethor is leading, not only not leading his men, he is planning his own demise and burning himself and his son. He's gone totally to madness and paranoia, and he's freaking out. And Theoden is marching off, riding into battle. And he dies in battle, but he dies with his honor and his dignity still. And it is just such a good reminder for what kind of life I think we want to live. I think the applicability of this text, and not necessarily what Tolkien was trying to get at, because he was just writing a story, but I think something that we can learn from this applicability is living a life like Theoden does. A life of risk, A life that marches out regardless of the cost. Sometimes a life that marches out even though things seem hopeless. And this is why in my life, I want to live more like Theoden than I want like Denethor. Which is a dumb thing to say because that's an obvious one. I don't think there's anybody who really wants to live more like Denethor than Theoden. But this is really why Theoden is just such a better character than Denethor, in my opinion. And why Theoden just always has my heart. I love Theoden so much. And his character growth has been incredible this entire book. And I'm going to miss him because he's just passed away where I'm currently reading in the book. But I will not miss Denethor. So rest in peace, Theoden. Rest in peace, Denethor also. Theoden, I'm going to miss you. But that's all I got for today. Remember, you can always subscribe if you made it this far and like the video. And as always, remember to look toward Numenor that was, and beyond to Elvenhome that is, and to that which is beyond Elvenhome and will ever be. I'll see you in the next one.